Hey everyone, this is Let's Get Practical with Daryl Girardier, and today we're talking about 5 surprising stats about online evangelism. Let's do this. Welcome to Let's Get Practical, the podcast about church communications from a practical standpoint. It's about what works and what doesn't. It's about helping you cut through all of the clutter and noise and get straight to the point. And today we're getting straight to the point about 5 surprising stats about online evangelism. Now, I'm not a big fan of statistics in the sense that I think they can be manipulated and they can be used for various purposes to prove a point, whatever that person's point of view may be. However, I do think a lot of times they're great discussion starters. And I think today we've got a good set of discussion starters about online evangelism. Now, my opinion on online evangelism, just to be clear, is that I think it's a bit murky in the sense of whether or not it's effective. I say murky because of the fact that there is something that you cannot get around when you're able to have a face-to-face conversation with somebody. When you are able to look somebody in the eye and have a conversation with them, there's just this intangible element that is really difficult to replace in an online setting. That's not to say you can't have online evangelism. What I'm saying is that online evangelism to me is one of those things where I think you can do it, but at the same time, I think there's something unique about having a face-to-face conversation. Again, that's not to say you can't have online evangelism. However, I know that for a lot of us, it's an increasing part of the conversation that we're having, as a lot of us build online campuses, online worship, if you will, through various live streaming techniques, or we're trying to train our people on how to share the gospel online. So we're having these conversations about what online evangelism looks like. Well, Barna research has released some stats about online evangelism. And there's a whole slew of stats, and I'll post a link to it in the show notes. But I found 5 of those stats to be quite interesting, and I think definitely worth a little bit of a conversation that we should camp out on. So here we go. Stat number 1, 28% of self-identified Christians share their faith via social media. That's 28% of self-identified Christians share their faith via social media. Now, honestly, when I look at this stat, it seems a bit high at first, 28%. So that's 1 out of every 4 self-identified Christian. And then, of course, after that, the question, when they say share their faith, are they talking about they're sharing the entire gospel, or are they just letting people know they're Christians? What does share their faith actually mean? Again, this goes back to my earlier point. The statistics can actually be bent one way or the other, depending on what you want them to say. Now, I think this is actually, again, a little bit high, but I think it's kind of surprising in the sense that on one level, if you count sharing your faith as I talk about my faith online, then I think 1 in 4 is actually somewhat accurate. I mean, think about the number of friends that you have who have posted prayer requests, talked about something that God's blessed them with, or an area in their life where they're like, well, we need help on X, so we need your prayer. So if you want to count that as sharing their faith, you could probably easily say, yeah, we could easily hit a 25, 30% number on that. So I don't think that stat's necessarily too misleading. I just think it's interesting in and of itself. So I don't know about you, but if I go back through my Facebook newsfeed, I could probably say that, yeah, I'd say 1 out of every 4 posts from my friends who are believers probably rank right in that area of them sharing their faith. What I'd be curious about is to see if that increases over, say, the next 5 to 10 years as more believers, as the younger believers who come online into the digital world, as their digital natives, if that just becomes sort of their vernacular, something they do on an everyday basis. Stat number 2, 47% of self-identified Christians agree technology and digital interactions have changed how others respond when I share my faith. That's 47% saying basically, hey, technology and digital interactions have changed how others respond when I share my faith. Now, of course, that doesn't tell you if it's a positive or negative response to them sharing their faith, but they say that definitely changed the way that people have responded to that. And I have to say, I agree with that. I think that makes a lot of sense when you think about it like this. Now, for a lot of us, when we talk about sharing our faith, we're talking about a verbal interaction. In terms of the old school way of evangelism, you would be given this 4 spiritual laws, and you may do a drawing on a napkin or something, but that was mostly door-to-door old school evangelism where you would read scripture and you would quote these things to people, and it was very much a verbal, oral interaction with somebody. And you may have written word and may have some like one of those pamphlets, if you will, those tracts, if you will. But if you think about it like this, if social media and technology allows us to do it in multiple forms, if it's video, if it's images, it's text, it's audio, there are myriad of ways now to share the gospel through technology. And so to say that that's changed the way people have responded to somebody sharing their faith, I actually think that's quite interesting. I agree. And I think as we have new avenues by which people can share their faith via different mediums, as virtual reality, AR, all that stuff kind of comes around, we're going to find more different ways to tackle the problem of how you can share your faith, which I am really excited about, because I think for a lot of us, we grew up in an era where there was only really one way to share your faith. You had to do it this exact way. It was a very prescribed methodology. And all of a sudden now we have new tools at our hands to help us do that. Stat number 3, 44% of self-identified Christians say technology and digital interactions have changed how they share their faith. I find this really interesting. In fact, I'm kind of surprised in some ways it's not a little bit higher. But one of the things I think that's been really great about technology and online evangelism, it's made it easier to share your faith. It's made it easier for you. It's lowered the friction, if you will, of you putting your faith out there, because really it's just a simple, you type, you hit enter, and boom, you've posted something on Facebook, you've changed the profile picture, you've changed maybe your bio and your Twitter link. And if you count that as sharing your faith, that's one easy way to do it. Or you can easily send a message to somebody. You can pray with somebody online. It's a very low friction in terms of the speed at which you can turn around and share your faith with someone. In fact, somebody just shared with me, actually it was Frank over at Tithely, shared with me something they've built for Rock Church out in San Diego, which allows their people to text other people the gospel. They get a text message, and then they open up the link on the text message, and it's their pastor. I think it's Miles McPherson is their pastor. It's him sharing the gospel with them, which I think is really, really cool. And again, this is one of the examples of how there's a friction, if you will, we've lowered the friction in terms of getting over the hump of sharing the gospel, because you had to do it verbally and you maybe got nervous. But now some of us, we're just more comfortable behind a computer saying what we believe and feel. And to be honest with you, if that's what's working for you and you're able to share the gospel, that's fantastic. Stat number 4. Now, this is actually one that actually really stood out to me, and it's quite interesting. What they did was they broke out this next set of stats about the give and take of evangelism between millennials, Gen X, and boomers. And there's one set of these stats I want to pull out. And that is technology and digital interactions have made sharing my faith easier. What I found most interesting was 58% of millennials agreed with that statement. 39% of boomers agreed with that statement, but 64% of Gen Xers said that digital interactions have made sharing my faith easier. And I think it goes back to my earlier point, which I think a lot of us Gen Xers, I'm going to throw myself in that category, we grew up right on the cusp of when the digital was breaking forth, but we also grew up right in the era where TV evangelism was at its height, and sharing your faith really boiled down to you memorizing some sort of prescriptive thing that you had to, shout back at somebody. I say shout back. You had to say back to somebody if you went to a Dare to Share conference or Acquire the Fire or any of those type of things. It was very much you had to be in your faith about your faith. And all of a sudden, again, we've lowered those walls and those barriers, made it easier to share your faith, and definitely kind of made it more scalable to share your faith via technology. So I get why 64% of boomers like me probably registered with that and said, yeah, I definitely agree with that statement. And then number 5, and this is actually a pull together of a set of stats. So this is the 5th one here is a set of stats. This is a breakdown of how people are sharing their faith online. 88% of people who share their faith online do it via personal posts. 86% sharing others' posts. 85% comment on other people's posts or walls. 58% it's somewhere in their profile information, and 34% it's somewhere in their profile image, whatever you use for your profile image. I find this really interesting because I find I really, really resonate with this, because I can easily see how the 88% of the personal posts have definitely become one of the easiest ways to share your faith online, and also sharing others' posts. I think the interesting is there's just only 2 points difference between personal posts and sharing others' posts, which means that if you can create really great social media content that helps people share their faith, and they're 86% likely to use it to share their faith. So you may give somebody else the leverage to share their faith, but they may not find the words to say it in a way that means something, or they can't properly feel like they can express it, but they can use somebody else's post to express it for them. They're more than willing to actually share that. In fact, 86% say that's what they do. I find the 85% commenting on others' posts or walls, I find that honestly a little high. And I've never found that really to be effective, because I find sometimes you really have to do it in the right context and the right tone, because sometimes it can come like you're preaching at people. So that's just, again, my personal opinion on that. And 58% say in their profile information, which I think is a little bit, I think it's a little bit dangerous sometimes to put it in the profile information and say that's where you're sharing your faith, because sometimes in my mind, that's often used against you if you decide to get in one of those Twitter battles and that kind of thing. But, don't go there. Just don't do that. And profile image. And I guess you can do it in your profile image. I would probably say not to, because I just think that probably means in some way, shape, or form, it's not you on your profile image. And unless it's your logo, your icon, or your brand, I really think it needs to be a picture of you in the profile image and not some, just picture of a lamb or a cross. I just think that's a little bit disingenuous, I think, for some people, because they actually want to see who they're actually interacting with. So what does all this mean? Well, for me, I look at this and ask the question, how am I equipping my people who at the church I serve to share their faith online? What am I doing to help them do that? How am I helping them become more comfortable and better at doing online evangelism? And when I think about that, and I think about that kind of that question, how am I doing that? I go back about 6 months ago when we started really kind of getting down in the weeds of that question. And what we decided to do as a church was to create an app that would equip people on how to share their faith. And we call it, it's actually just Brentwood Baptist Church, but it's an app that is solely based on what we're calling gospel conversations. So we talk about sharing your faith, we'll call them gospel conversations. And this app is designed to do three things. It's designed to, one, let you report back to the church about the gospel conversations you've had. It's to train you on how to have gospel conversations. It's a slew of audio training modules that you can go in and take. And there's also some video from the Bible Project that you can watch as well. And then last but not least, it's got a help button that lets you request help from what we call a gospel conversation coach, somebody who's trained in having gospel conversations, to have a one-on-one with you to help you, walk you through how you can better have a gospel conversation, or maybe walk you through a gospel conversation you're currently having and you're not sure it's going the direction you want it to go. So that's what we've done to start the process of equipping our people for online evangelism. And that's just been phase one. We will roll out more content in phase two, probably sometime later in midwinter. But that's the question I think you need to ask yourself. What are you doing to equip your people to have digital conversations online and face-to-face, and what online tools and mechanism technology are you using to help them, equip them to do that? I think one of the things we've got to be careful of is that when we talk about online evangelism, sometimes you will get this argument that I think is a bit reductionist from people, which is, well, they shouldn't be on their phones to begin with. They should be having face-to-face conversation. Phones are bad. All technology is bad because there's bad things on technology, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And okay, we all know there's studies that say the more time you spend on your phone or on Facebook, it's not healthy for you. And to be honest with you, that does make sense. And I think there's a lot of validity to that. But if we're just being bluntly honest, we know people aren't going to put down their phones anytime soon. We know they're not going to get off Facebook anytime soon. We know they're not getting off Instagram anytime soon. So why not find ways to help them in those mediums and those mechanisms and in those social media channels? Why not provide them ways to which they can share their faith and train them how to do that? In other words, what if you say, if your habit is going on Facebook every day, how can I make that habit a gospel-oriented habit? How do I help you shift the way you look at Facebook? Because you're going to open up Facebook. How do I help you shift the way and change your heart about the way when you open up Facebook, what you look for and the conversations you look to have? Now, that's hard. It's not easy to do, but I believe that's the thrust we have to take. We have to understand that our people are going to do these things. They're going to get online. They're going to live on Instagram. They're going to live on Facebook. That's what people are doing these days. If you don't believe me, just go through a restaurant and just look at everybody's phone. They're on usually Facebook, Instagram, or their email. How do you help them have that conversation? Focus on doing that. And if you will, moving the needle a little bit in people's lives. Yes, it will be difficult, but if you can help somebody move the needle a little bit in their life, I'm telling you, all of a sudden sharing that faith becomes just a little bit easier. And before you know it, they quote unquote get the reps in. Okay. They get more comfortable with it. They get more practice in. And then all of a sudden it becomes second nature. So that when they open up those apps, they're looking at it from, how do I have a gospel conversation? How do I share my faith with somebody when they open up the app, versus how do I post pictures of my kids? Whatever that is that they are currently doing when they open up their social media apps. So there you go. Those are 5 surprising stats about online evangelism. I'd love to know your thoughts on online evangelism. If you got some, just hit me up in the link in the show notes. I'd love to hear from you. Love to get some of your thoughts. And what are you doing to encourage your church to engage in online evangelism? Thanks again for listening to this podcast. If you love this podcast, please leave us a rating on iTunes. We would love it and we'd really appreciate it. Also, don't forget, you can always give us feedback by going to the link in the show notes. You can do that as well. We'd love to hear back from you on that. Hope you're having a great day, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye.